Hey guys, tonight we travel to a smoky longhouse on the edge of a frozen fjord, where the scent of pine tar hangs in the air and somewhere in the background a sheep is yelling at a bucket. You're watching a woman braid the hair of her husband, her fingers moving with muscle memory, not just love. It's dawn. The morning frost is crisp enough to taste, and the man is dressed in full battle gear except for one thing: his hair. Long, sun-lightened, maybe a little matted from yesterday's chores, but now it's being gently woven into tight, perfect braids. He's about to march off to possibly die, maybe in Scotland, maybe in a bog, but she's focused on symmetry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. She's wrapping a red wool ribbon into the final braid now, something he insists is for luck, though you suspect it's because his mother told him it looked nice once. He winces slightly as she tightens it, not because of the pain, but because of what it means. Viking hairstyles weren't just about looks. They were about preparation, identity, and control in a world where the only thing more unpredictable than your cow's mood was your own survival. Historians generally agree that hair rituals were part of battle prep, whether it was tight braids to keep locks out of the face or elaborate arrangements that made you look scarier than you felt. You weren't just walking into combat, you were walking in styled. Fringe evidence, even poetic snippets in skaldic verse, hints that some warriors wouldn't go into a raid unless their hair was properly braided. Some say it honored the gods, others say it just kept lice away and looked cool, both valid. There's a pause as the man stands and pulls on his helmet, careful not to crush the neat plates. He thanks her with a half smile, but he doesn't leave just yet. She hands him something small, a carved wooden comb with his initials burned in. Combs were a big deal. Archaeologists find them in nearly every Viking grave. Fancy ones, travel-sized ones, even some with little chains to attach to your belt. In this world, you carry your comb like a modern person carries their phone. You don't leave home without it. She brushes the strand off his shoulder. He jokes, half-heartedly, that if he dies today, at least he'll die handsome. She swats his arm, but doesn't deny it. The truth is, appearance mattered. Vikings were warriors, sure, but also poets, politicians, traders, and, this might shock you, clean freaks. The man finally walks out into the morning light. The wind grabs the ribbon tails at the end of his braids. He's not the only one out there. Around the village, other men are getting their hair done too. Some sit quietly while wives or brothers work. Others do it themselves with bronze mirrors or reflected ice. No one wants to look like a mess, even on a raid. You hear one boy beg for a single braid like his older cousins. His mother snorts, says he can earn it by not tripping over goats all week. Fair. In one particularly chaotic corner, a warrior is arguing with his brother over whose hair is shinier. They settle it with a tug of war using a goat. The goat wins. Even among these rough-hewn lives of axes and oaths, there's a quiet choreography to the way they prepare. No one says it aloud, but hair is a kind of armor. A ritual, a thread between worlds. One braid might hide a token from home, another, a knot meant to catch bad spirits. These are not superstitions, not here. These are tools, like swords but softer. You glance around the village square. A basin of warm water steams near the blacksmith. One man dunks his beard in it like he's baptizing a chin. Another rubs in some mysterious balm he claims came from Frankish monks. Smells suspiciously like rancid butter and pine needles. Might also be cursed, but his beard looks amazing. A few younger boys try to copy older warriors' styles and end up with lopsided twists that look like defeated pastries. One girl, perhaps 6, expertly braids a dog's tail. The dog looks proud. There's laughter, sure, but there's reverence too. You start to feel it. That hair for these people is more than just aesthetics. It's memory, legacy, maybe even fate. When the warriors leave, their loved ones stay behind and wait, not for letters or news, but for the sight of a familiar braid across the fjord bouncing back home. Not all of them return, but the ones who do, they walk back into this little world of smoke and ribbon and combs, and someone will take their helmet off, unravel the braids, and begin again. You crouch in the dirt beside a shallow Viking grave, your breath fogging in the cold morning air. The burial mound has half collapsed from time, but the wooden coffin beneath has preserved something unexpected. Not weapons, not coin, not even the usual iron rivets of a long-decayed boat. No, what you find here are combs, 4 of them, all different sizes. One even has teeth so fine it could outmatch your modern lice comb. Welcome to the strangest truth about Viking hygiene. They took grooming very seriously, possibly too seriously. Some might say the modern obsession with hair tools began with fashion bloggers. Others would be wrong, because somewhere around the 9th century, Norse men and women were already hauling bone, antler, and ivory combs across continents. You've got one comb carved from whalebone, another made from the antler of a now very annoyed reindeer, and one with swirling designs that hint at Irish influence, probably traded or looted, but we're not judging. And they weren't just buried with combs. These things show up everywhere, stuffed into leather satchels hanging from brooches tucked under layers of wool in every excavation from Dublin to Kyiv. Historians don't fully agree why there were so many. Some say they were practical. Lice was a constant foe. Others think the combs were tokens of affection shared between lovers or family. And then there's the crowd that believes combs were status symbols, like a Viking version of a Rolex, only made of elk and much more likely to smell like sheep. One quirky find from a burial site in Birka. A set of combs accompanied by a tiny wooden box labeled, well, interpreted as, for hair things. That's right, you may be squatting in mud, but you're basically inside a Viking's bathroom drawer. The grave you're staring at belonged to a middle-aged man. Nothing flashy, no silver coins, no ceremonial sword, but the number of grooming tools surrounding him says something. He cared, or someone did. Maybe his hair was the best in the village. Maybe his wife made sure he looked good in the afterlife. Maybe he was the ancient Scandinavian equivalent of your friend who brings beard oil camping. Historians still argue whether this kind of grave goods setup meant the deceased had a specific role, like a village groomer or hair cutter, or whether it was just part of everyday carry. You straighten up and glance around. Nearby, a second grave's been opened. This one holds a woman, older, probably once a grandmother. She too has a comb, but hers is more worn, its teeth smoothed by decades of use. It's wrapped in a bit of cloth dyed a faded blue, once possibly vibrant with woad or indigo. It smells faintly of something herbal. You can almost imagine her pulling that comb through long silver hair while telling stories to squirmy children who only half listened. Hair was intimate, not just a public display but a private practice, and the tools that touched it were personal. In many settlements, combs were carved with individual motifs, animals, spiral designs, even secret rune markings. Some of them were believed to ward off spirits, others to bring fertility or luck, and some, delightfully, seemed to exist solely to say, "Look at me, I have excellent grooming taste." Back in the living world of the Viking Age, a man might be teased if he didn't have his comb tucked in his belt. Not because he looked sloppy, though let's be honest, helmet hair was no joke, but because that absence suggested you weren't trying, and trying mattered. There's even a 10th century saga where a jarl is mocked for showing up to a feast with filthy whiskers. He's so humiliated he runs outside to wash his face in a frozen stream. Scholars still debate whether this tale was exaggerated for comic effect or if, indeed, clean hair had social stakes higher than blood feuds. I mean, probably both. You brush dirt from your hands as a wind picks up, whispering across the field. If you listen closely, you could almost believe it's the ghost of someone telling you to moisturize. Nearby, a reconstruction team is carefully arranging artifacts for display. They're placing the combs in glass cases, labeling them with words like utilitarian, ritual object, everyday essential. One intern whispers, "I can't believe how many of these they had." The lead archaeologist chuckles and replies, "You've clearly never lived with lice." And while lice were definitely a problem, especially during long winters or extended voyages, the sheer beauty of some of these combs suggests more than pest control. Some were carved so finely they could have passed for jewelry. Others came in nested sets, one big comb, one travel-sized. You can practically hear a Viking voice muttering, "I'll just take the little one for raids. Don't want to overpack." The dirt under your boots holds centuries of grooming routines. Maybe a young man once sat right here, sharpening the teeth of his comb, trying to impress someone. Maybe a child lost theirs and cried because it was the one their aunt carved. These tools weren't throwaways, they were mementos. Artifacts of self-care in a world filled with chaos, cold, and the occasional berserker rage. So next time someone scoffs at your 3-step hair care routine, remind them, you're not being vain, you're being historically accurate. You're sitting cross-legged in a shadowy Viking longhouse, watching something that might technically be considered a romantic moment, if your definition of romance includes lice and animal fat. Across the smoky room, a young couple is exchanging gifts. Not jewelry, not poetry, not even a lovingly whittled spoon, no. She hands him a lice comb carved from antler, and he gives her a sealed jar of goose fat. The mood is tender. Their smiles are shy. And you, dear listener, are learning that Norse courtship rituals were absolutely wild. You see, in a time and place where war was frequent and winters were unforgiving, luxury meant practicality. If a gift didn't help you survive lice season or chapped skin, it wasn't worth giving. So instead of flowers, you gave grooming tools. Instead of perfume, you offered bear grease infused with thyme. And instead of a box of chocolates, you just might, hand over a salve that smelled faintly of garlic and rendered seal. And it worked. These people didn't just survive, they thrived. Their standards for hygiene were, by medieval European standards, absurdly high. Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan famously remarked how shocked he was that Viking men bathed regularly, even combed their hair daily. His tone reads like someone watching a pack of wild wolves break out into synchronized spa treatments. Here's the best part. Those combs they exchanged, they weren't just symbolic, they were in use. Constant use. Because lice weren't occasional guests, they were roommates. And no one wanted a reputation for being the walking mead hall infestation. Some graves, as we've seen, contain combs carved with scenes of animals grooming themselves. Bears licking fur, birds preening. It's unclear whether this was a metaphor or just some Norse artisan saying, "Look, even birds have standards." Historians still argue whether gifting a lice comb was considered flirtatious, medicinal, or mildly insulting. Probably all three, depending on how attractively you handed it over. You watch as the boy gently tucks the comb into his belt while the girl sniffs the goose fat like it's perfume. She nods approvingly. It's not spoiled. Yet. Hair maintenance wasn't just about appearance. It was about ritual. You imagine their daily routine, someone scraping resin from pine bark to use as a sticky scalp scrub. Another mixing ash and snow to clean out oil. One source hints at the use of fermented whey as a kind of Norse conditioner. Yes, your hair might smell like sour milk, but it would shine in the sun like Odin's own beard. And if you think that's strange, let's talk about lard. Goose fat, bear grease, even sheep tallow. These were the base of many a grooming routine. Mixed with herbs, ash, or crushed minerals, they could be shaped into pastes that served as both moisturizer and sealant. In cold, dry air, it helped protect the scalp. In warm, damp weather, it kept lice from burrowing too deep. Did it smell nice? Not really. Did it work? Often, yes. Did it accidentally start a few fires near open hearths? Almost definitely. And let's not overlook the social bonding this created. Grooming wasn't private. In many longhouses, people would sit together, friends, family, couples, and comb each other's hair. Not just to clean it, but to talk, to share stories, to flirt maybe. The lice might have been a nuisance, but the grooming, that was intimacy. One rare Icelandic poem speaks of a woman who refuses to share her comb with a man she once loved. She compares it to letting him near her soul's threads. A bit melodramatic? Sure. But in a world with no electricity, no email, and far too much wool, your hair and the hands that tended it were deeply personal. A young boy plops down near the couple now, holding a spool bent comb. His sister grabs it, muttering about proper technique. You see her drag it carefully across his scalp, checking for telltale white nits. He fidgets, then settles, head bowed in silent resignation. You've never seen delousing look so gentle. One fringe account from the Orkneys mentions children being punished. Not for having lice, but for not using their combs. That's right. The Viking version of grounding was apparently no mead and extra grooming chores. And here's a theory for your dreams tonight. Some scholars think certain braiding patterns help discourage lice altogether. Tight, overlapping designs that left few hiding spots. It's speculative, yes, but intriguing. Like the idea that Vikings might have passed on braid styles the way we hand down skincare routines. My mother taught me the double-cross plate with rosemary oil keeps the scalp clean and repels trolls. Back in the longhouse, the couple rises. The comb has vanished into his belt in the jar of fat. Well, she's tucked it in her satchel like a treasure. They smile once more and the moment ends. You stretch and glance around. Someone else is sharpening a comb with a tiny file. Another person is boiling cloth in an herb-steeped cauldron, possibly trying to make it smell less like sheep. You realize that hair care for the Vikings wasn't a luxury. It was a form of armor. It meant dignity. It meant affection. It meant, in a small and itchy way, love. You're kneeling beside a smoldering hearth now, your fingers warm against the soot-streaked stones, and someone's just handed you a lump of what looks suspiciously like mud. It's not. It's soap. Viking soap. Homemade, deeply questionable, and surprisingly effective. Welcome to the messy, bubbling world of Norse hygiene chemistry. The woman stirring the pot across from you is grinning like she knows a secret. She probably does. Inside that iron cauldron is a mix of wood ash and rendered animal fat, possibly goat. The ash is high in lye, which makes this concoction dangerously alkaline and capable of stripping grease from anything, including pride. Still, when it cools and solidifies, it becomes a chunk of soap strong enough to polish your helmet and scrub your scalp. One tool, two problems solved. You watch her ladle the hot soap into horn molds, each shaped like a leaf. Cute, functional, potentially burny. Historians still debate whether this soap was used daily or saved for special events, like weddings, feasts, or the semi-annual "let's clean everything before we're snowed in" festival. What's clear is that Vikings had access to soap, understood how to make it, and probably had strong opinions about whether goat fat made for a better lather than pig. A young man walks in now, hair thick with soot and pride. He's clearly just come from the forge. He sniffs the soap in your hand, shrugs and grabs a hardened chunk of the stuff. Then he drops to one knee, tears off his helmet, and starts working the lather into his beard with the same concentration he probably applies to swordplay. Ash soap doesn't smell like lavender or sandalwood. It smells like survival, like sweat, smoke, and whatever herbs were available that week. Some families added rosemary, others preferred pine. A few fringe recipes even called for crushed oyster shells, which, we can only assume, exfoliated very aggressively. Soap was only one part of the routine. Once the hair was clean, well, cleaner, it needed oiling. Out came the bear grease mixed with whatever local plants they didn't eat that day. This step wasn't just aesthetic, It helped seal in moisture, repel lice, and stop the wind from turning your scalp into cracked leather. You watch as the man finishes scrubbing, then combs through his beard with a little bone tool shaped like a fish. When he's done, he leans back and proudly announces, "Ready for the thing." The thing, by the way, is the Viking assembly, part court, part parliament, part outdoor drama club. You didn't show up looking like a barn animal. Reputation mattered, and so did presentation. There's an old Norse insult, loosely translated as greasy-headed goat, that shows up in several sagas. It's a low blow, suggesting someone not only looks a mess, but probably smells like mutton soup. You don't call someone that lightly. It's the kind of insult that starts a duel, or at least a very tense breakfast, which is why this soap, this ash, this oily ritual by firelight, it's not just cleaning, it's social currency. Clean hair means you respect yourself, your gods, your family. Unwashed hair? That's a moral failing, a personal insult, and possibly an omen of misfortune. In some regions, soap was even gifted during engagements, wrapped in linen, tied with ribbon, and tucked inside dowry chests. Because nothing says welcome to the family like a bar of your finest goat lye. And just when you think it couldn't get more serious, you hear a father scolding his teenage son. "Don't go to the market like that. You'll shame the whole clan. Use the good soap." The boy groans, mutters something about how everyone smells like smoke anyway, and slinks toward the wash basin. You smile because this scene is painfully familiar. Swap the soap for deodorant and it's practically modern. One curious tidbit: in some settlements, soap making became a community task. Each household contributed fat, herbs, and wood ash, and one designated person, often a respected elder, oversaw the cook. Not because it was complicated, but because bad soap could scar your skin, or attract wolves, or both. You step outside now, blinking in the late sun. A group of men are standing in a loose circle, passing around soap bars like they're comparing prized tools. One swears by birch ash. Another insists goose fat gives a superior shine. One quietly admits he mixes his with honey for scent, then blushes when they all nod approvingly. In the distance, a woman dips a small brush into oil and begins painting it across the part in her daughter's hair. The oil glistens. The girl fidgets, but she says nothing. She knows this is part of being seen, of being respected, of being Viking. Even warriors on campaign packed tiny soap shards into bags. Not much, but enough for a quick scrub before meeting a rival chieftain. You weren't just battling over land or livestock. You were battling over dignity, and no one wants to be outclassed by a cleaner enemy. You head back inside the longhouse and sit by the fire once more. The soap has hardened now. One bar is carved with a sunburst, another with runes. Someone hands you one, nodding approvingly. "That one's for luck," they say. You don't know if luck can be lathered on, but as you sniff the faint scent of pine and smoke, you're willing to believe. You're standing in front of a bearded elder now, and not just any elder. A man whose beard is so majestic it might require its own longship. It curls down to mid-chest, streaked with gray like a winter fjord, and every strand seems to know exactly where it belongs. You're not sure whether to bow or ask it for advice. He catches you staring and gives a lopsided grin. Then slowly he begins combing. His fingers move with ritual precision, parting the hairs, checking the shape, smoothing it into its daily form. You watch the process in awe, not because it's elaborate, but because it's meaningful. In this world, a beard isn't just facial hair, it's biography. You've heard the tales. Some warriors braid one knot per major battle. Others twine silver thread through their beards only after surviving a sea voyage. A long, well-maintained beard tells a story of survival, of wisdom, of knowing when to oil and when to comb. It's a resume you wear on your face. Mainstream records, especially those poetic sagas passed down like campfire folklore, make frequent reference to beards. Not just in terms of appearance, but honor. To shave a man's beard without consent, that was public humiliation, a declaration that he'd lost his standing. In one saga, a captured jarl is forcibly shaved before exile. He weeps not from the banishment, but the bare chin. Historians still argue whether this act was symbolic or just spiteful, probably both. You shift your weight as another man walks by, his beard styled differently. This one is forked at the bottom with copper beads on each point. You blink. The beads jingle slightly as he walks. Functional jewelry, possibly. Audible warning system, also plausible. Even within the Viking world, beard styles varied. Some regions preferred thick and square-shaped, others long and tapered. Archaeologists have found combs shaped to match specific beard types, suggesting that maintenance was customized, not one size fits all. And that's not just grooming, that's branding. A younger man approaches the elder, beard just starting to fill in, patchy at the sides, earnest in spirit. He asks respectfully if he's ready to braid. The elder strokes his chin literally and metaphorically and murmurs, 2 more winters, then hands him a bottle of something that smells like pine tar and sea salt. Encouragement in a jar. You chuckle and he must hear it because he adds, better than whatever they're rubbing on horses these days. Across the settlement, you see a woman running a fine-toothed comb through her husband's beard. She pauses, inspects something tiny, then flicks it away. He grunts, more embarrassed than annoyed. She doesn't mock. She just keeps combing, murmuring a prayer under her breath. You realize it's part care, part ritual. Hair was spiritual in many Norse beliefs, a tether to memory, to identity. There are even accounts, fringe but fascinating, of warriors cutting a piece of their beard before battle and placing it inside their tunic. A token, a reminder of home, or, in darker moments, something to return to loved ones if they didn't make it back. One tale, less famous but oddly touching, tells of a blacksmith who refused to cut his beard for 10 years while mourning his brother. By the time he relented, the beard had to be trimmed with a blade typically reserved for trimming horse hooves. That's devotion, or maybe just stubbornness. Either way, very on brand for the Norse. You ask the elder how often he oils it. He shrugs. When the wind howls or when I feel forgotten. Poetic, possibly senile, definitely wise. There's a rhythm here, a beard rhythm. Comb, oil, twist, smooth, repeat. The tools are simple. Bone comb, fingers, sometimes a bit of melted resin. The intention, however, is complex. This isn't about looking good. It's about being seen. by the gods, by the village, by the man in the water barrel who keeps staring at his reflection like it owes him money. Even disputes could be beard-based. One legal record mentions a man suing his neighbor for singeing his beard during a drunken torch dance. Damages awarded. 1 goat and 2 soap bars justice. And don't forget the traveling poets, the skalds. They often described beards as metaphors. Storm nests, the winter rope, the chin's forest. Some of those lines survive today. Others are lost in time, shouted into the wind by very drunk men standing on tables. You start to understand. In the Viking world, beards weren't just grown, they were built, cultivated, maintained like a ship or a sword, and the way you treated your beard reflected how you treated your legacy. The elder finally finishes his combing. His beard gleams in the firelight like polished wood. He nods to you, then turns to help a young boy untangle a very unfortunate knot in his bangs. And just like that, the master passes on the ritual. You're staring at a polished bronze surface now, shimmering faintly in the sunlight, propped at an angle just right to catch your own face, sort of. The reflection is more blob than likeness, but it'll do. A Viking man crouches beside you, squinting at his reflection, tongue poking slightly out in concentration as he parts his hair down the center. Not the war paint, not the runes. This is the most serious thing he'll do all morning. You might have assumed that grooming was a woman's domain in Viking society. And that's where you'd be hilariously wrong. Because if anything, Viking men were arguably the high-maintenance ones. Modern-day beardsmen, amateur hour, these guys invented the look. He's using a 2-pronged antler comb to shape the strands. First down the middle, then tight against the scalp, likely preparing for the layered braid wrap style that was favored by younger warriors in Denmark. He grumbles as one piece falls out. His friend walks by and mutters, "Use more goose grease," then snorts and tosses him a waxy lump the size of a walnut. Crisis averted. Across the clearing, 2 women are chatting while weaving garlands. One of them is brushing her daughter's hair, humming. It's a simple rhythm. Comb, twist, tie. But they're not the only ones focused on appearance. You glance around and it seems every third man is grooming in some form. Fixing a braid, oiling a mustache, arguing over beard bead placement. There's a myth that Viking women were the ones obsessed with looks while the men were off storming monasteries. In reality, both genders cared deeply about their appearance, and it often blurred the lines of labor. Sure, women handled household soap making and passed down braid techniques, but men weren't just passive recipients. They learned, practiced, innovated, and some got very invested in the results. Some fringe accounts suggest that in larger settlements like Hedeby, entire booths were set up in market areas for grooming services, braiding, oil sales, even beard trimming. Were these Viking salons? Possibly. One poem even jokes that a man with a crooked part is twice cursed by the gods and by the girls. Historians still argue whether these descriptions point to full-time grooming specialists or just part-time enthusiasts with steady hands and access to antler. What's certain is that Norse people viewed grooming as a skymd, daily act, not divided along rigid gender roles but woven into the rhythm of life. You return your gaze to the bronze. The man beside you is now carefully applying a bit of reddish pigment near his temples. War paint, you ask. He laughs. Just sunburnt clay. Hides the spots. You nod, unsure whether to be impressed or concerned. Either way, it works. A child runs past with what might be her father's comb, brandishing it like a sword. He yells something unintelligible, then goes back to plaiting. Priorities. You notice something else now. Another man, older, showing a teenager how to section off the hair before starting the twist. He doesn't do it for him. He just watches, offers corrections. They both nod seriously. This isn't a casual chore. It's an inherited skill. Hair routines were passed down like recipes or fishing tricks, and they weren't just functional. They held meaning. Some styles were age-bound, others seasonal. A tight top braid might suggest a recent voyage. Looser waves might signal mourning. Or, less poetically, that you ran out of grease. In one particularly charming account from Greenland, a young man is mocked for showing up to a feast with flat hair because he didn't steam it properly. You wonder what that even means. Then you see a clay bowl, its lid slightly ajar, steam curling from inside. Ah, improvised sauna. Clever. One of the women from earlier walks over now. She glances at your friend's half-done braids, tuts, and sets to work. He stiffens, clearly uncomfortable, until she finishes. Then he smiles like a child offered dessert. You realize that touch, here, is layered. It's not just correction, it's care. The boundary between women's work and warriors' pride isn't as firm as history textbooks make it seem. These people, Vikings, raiders, farmers, traders, were practical. Hair care was part of survival, part of attraction, part of ritual. And so they did it together. One last glance in the bronze. Your hair is still a mess, but you've learned something. That maybe vanity isn't the opposite of strength. Maybe sometimes it's how strength introduces itself. You're perched now on a low wooden bench beside two men arguing, quietly but with the kind of intensity usually reserved for blood feuds, over something absurdly specific. Who owns the rights to a stolen bar of soap? Apparently, one claims it was his grandmother's recipe. The other insists he swapped a silver brooch for it in Kaupang. You've wandered directly into a Viking legal dispute over hygiene. And here's the shocking part, this is not unusual. Viking law codes like the Gragas in Iceland or the older Gulathing law in Norway actually contain provisions about personal grooming. Real enforceable laws about hair. For example, if you forcibly cut off someone's hair, or worse, shaved their head, you didn't just insult them, you legally humiliated them. In some cases, it was considered the equivalent of physical assault. You could be fined, exiled, or challenged to a duel, because shaving someone bald wasn't just mean. It was reputation homicide. One particularly juicy clause in the Gulathing Code specifies that cutting off a man's mustache in public was grounds for revenge. Not just a fine, but full-on feud-level retaliation. Historians still argue whether this rule was ever actually enforced or was simply meant to discourage tavern-side mischief with razors. Either way, it shows how seriously these people took their follicles. You glance over at a woman who's listening to the soap theft argument while braiding her daughter's hair. She's clearly heard it all before. She smirks, mutters, "Should have labeled it," and continues her work. In her lap is a small pouch that smells like juniper and resin, likely where she stores her household's combs and hairpins. These tools weren't just family property. They were heirlooms, and they could be involved in actual lawsuits. In one obscure case preserved in Icelandic record, a woman accuses her neighbor of stealing her oiled braiding comb and replacing it with a dull, lice-infested one. Witnesses were called. The combs were examined. A verdict was issued. No one was executed, but reputations permanently frizzed. You see, appearance wasn't optional. It was part of honor. And honor was the backbone of Norse society. To be mocked for your hair was to be called lazy, untrustworthy, or even cursed. To insult someone's grooming was to challenge their status. One saga even features a warrior insulting another by claiming, "Your beard runs from battle before your feet do." A sick burn, and possibly true. The line between personal style and public shame was razor thin, literally. That's why hair crimes, yes, that's a phrase now, were taken seriously. Did someone singe your bangs in a torch prank? They owed you restitution. Did someone cut your wife's braid while she slept? That was grounds for exile or blood compensation. Viking legal codes used the term nidingsverk to describe acts of profound dishonor, and forcibly altering someone's appearance often qualified. One fringe story even claims that a chieftain once paid a sheep, a bolt of linen, and a full horn of mead to settle a dispute over a burned mustache. You'd laugh, but then again, have you ever had your mustache burned off in public? Back by the bench, the two men reach a verdict. The comb in question, the one found in the accused's tent, has a faint rune marking. Turns out it is the original owner's family symbol. Case closed. The accused shrugs and offers a peace gesture. A small bar of soap wrapped in moss. Crisis averted. There's a rhythm to these rules, not oppressive but guiding. The laws didn't just punish, they protected rituals. Haircutting wasn't random, it was symbolic. There were rites for boys reaching manhood, for brides before marriage, even for the dead. Cutting someone's hair outside those moments was like rewriting their story without permission. In a quieter corner of the village, you see a man trimming his beard with a curved blade, catching the clippings on a piece of cloth. He mutters a prayer to Odin, folds the cloth neatly and burns it in a small fire. Not because he's superstitious. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly because some believed hair retained power even after being cut. There's an old belief that witches could hex you through your hair, so if you left clippings around carelessly, well, best not risk waking up with goat hooves. Some people even buried their combings under stones or tossed them into rivers to return the strength to the earth. Practical recycling, Viking style. The law wasn't just about punishment, it was about permission. If you wanted to cut your child's hair in a new style, that was a family decision. If you braided your hair in a pattern reserved for warriors, you better have earned it. Pretending was a bigger crime than being messy. You get the sense that hair here was like language. It spoke, it accused, it soothed, and sometimes it lied. But only if you let it. You're standing near the entrance of a wooden temple now. Nothing grand, No towering spires or golden altars, just a quiet structure, soot-darkened beams, and the scent of pine needles, smoke, and something faintly floral. Inside, people leave offerings. You expect food, maybe coins or carved tokens. But no, this altar is cluttered with something far more personal. Hair, braided clippings, little coils tied with thread, even whole plates preserved in beeswax. You lean closer and see names scratched into wooden tags. Tora, Eric, Liv, each marking a strand given to the gods. It's oddly intimate and strangely beautiful. Hair in Viking belief wasn't just grooming material. It was spiritual, a link between the physical and the divine. Offerings weren't made from what was convenient. They were made from what mattered. A warrior might leave a lock of hair before a voyage, asking Thor for favorable winds. A mother might snip her child's curls, offering them to Freya in exchange for protection. Hair was part of you, and giving it up meant something. You feel the silence in the room, not stiff but reverent. A woman steps forward, unwraps a tiny linen pouch, and places a braid, golden, weathered, likely years old, beside a carved boar figurine. She whispers a prayer, then retreats. Some scholars believe hair was considered a vessel for energy or memory, that to offer it was to sacrifice part of your essence. Others think it was more symbolic, proof of intention, a tactile gesture to mark a vow. Historians still debate whether the gods were thought to literally accept the hair, or whether it was a kind of message. I'm serious. I'll give this piece of myself if it helps. Outside, a group of boys play near the temple steps, daring each other to tug a strand from their own heads and toss it inside. One finally does, wincing dramatically. The others cheer and one mutters, "Thor's gonna give him strong hair now." Maybe he's joking, maybe not. Even in the sagas, hair appears in sacred contexts. One tale tells of a shield maiden who cuts her braid and burns it during a blood oath. Another features a king who refuses to trim his beard until Frey grants him a good harvest. The gods don't seem to mind the hair. They may even expect it. There's one particularly curious artifact, a stone amulet unearthed near Uppsala, carved in the shape of a braid. No inscription, just a perfect coiled twist. Theories abound. Was it worn as protection? A love token? A warning to enemies not to underestimate the well-groomed? We may never know. But this wasn't just about big temple moments. Even in daily rituals, people invoked the gods while grooming. Combing a child's hair, a quiet thanks to Sif, Thor's wife, goddess of golden locks. Oiling a warrior's braid before battle, a whispered plea to Odin for victory. In some households, the comb itself might be blessed, passed down from mother to daughter, marked with runes for fertility or strength. You notice now that one of the offerings, tucked behind a wooden idol of Freyja, is darker, almost charred. You're told it was singed in a fire, the hair of someone who survived a raid. They offered the remains as gratitude or penance. Or both. Even death didn't sever this connection. Some funerary rites included the braiding of the deceased's hair, then cutting a portion to be buried separately or kept by loved ones. In rare cases, locks were sent across seas to notify distant kin of someone's passing. A somber telegram, soft and wordless. One fringe tale from the Faroe Islands tells of a fisherman who lost his wife and wore a bit of her hair inside a silver locket for the rest of his life. Not scandalous, not even dramatic, just a quiet devotion looped around memory. You look back at the temple altar. More people have arrived, each bringing something. A scrap of linen, a carved comb, a braid. It's not spectacle, it's offering. And the gods, whether they listen or not, are present in every whisper. Someone asks you quietly if you want to leave something. You hesitate, but then you reach up, pluck a single strand, and tie it into a loop. It's nothing. And yet somehow it feels like everything. Outside, the sky has turned the color of cooling iron. A breeze stirs your hair, and for a moment you wonder if that's someone or something responding. You're weaving through a crowded settlement now. Market stalls of wool and fish skins, the clang of blacksmiths echoing off timber walls, and everywhere you turn, braids. Braids in every shape and size. From the elaborate crown-like twists of noblewomen to the tight, practical plaits running down a child's back. And not just the women. Men wear them too, sometimes in threes, sometimes interlaced with colored thread, sometimes braided so tightly you wonder if they still have circulation. You pause beside a merchant's booth selling braiding needles and hair wax. Two women haggle fiercely over a spool of red-dyed wool. Apparently someone's daughter is getting married and her hair needs to look like her mother's wedding day. You nod politely and try not to get roped into the argument. This, you realize, is about more than style. It's about status. In the Viking world, braids were more than practical. They were a visual language. Each style spoke of rank, family, even regional origin. Some patterns were reserved for nobility, others signaled mourning. Some were meant only for those who'd completed specific rites, like a sea voyage, or a blood feud, or childbirth. To wear the wrong braid, that was a silent insult. You might as well announce to the village that you were a fraud. Historians still argue whether certain styles were codified by law or just enforced by custom. The sagas don't always spell it out, but we do know that hair was observed, commented on, and judged. A story about a man losing his inheritance begins with his aunt muttering, "No nephew of mine parts his hair like that." Ouch. One archaeological find from Ryby includes a tiny bronze plaque depicting a woman with an ornate triple-loop braid. The level of detail suggests not just artistry but identity, possibly a clan marker or even an early kind of heraldry. We can't read it today, but to those who saw her walking into a feast hall, her hair said everything before she even spoke. You walk past a group of girls sitting on a log, braiding each other's hair in a perfect assembly line. One girl finishes a twist, nods in satisfaction, and declares, "Now you look like your Aunt Thora." Her friend beams. It's not flattery, it's lineage. Elsewhere, a man with a carefully wrapped top knot is stopped by a friend who adjusts it slightly. "That one's for warriors, not fishmongers," he teases. The man laughs and redoes it, clearly unbothered, but he knew, and now you know, there's a silent code at play here. Some fringe scholars suggest there were braid schools, or at least elders designated to teach correct technique. More likely it was passed down informally through mothers, sisters, and community matriarchs. But the knowledge was respected. Braid work wasn't tossed off as vanity. It was part of your role. To mess it up wasn't just a fashion faux pas. It risked offending gods, neighbors, or both. You spot a young boy pouting beside a barrel. His older sister is braiding his hair into 2 loops and tying them off with blue yarn. He's clearly not thrilled, but she swats his shoulder. "You're 7 now," she says. "Start looking it." He sighs but sits still. Even children carry these expectations. Your braid equals your stage of life. Later in the gathering hall, the community assembles for the seasonal feast. The flickering torchlight dances over 100 different braiding styles. Each person coded, categorized, woven into a web of identity more intricate than any saga scroll. You see the elder from earlier, his beard in a triple cord, his head wrapped in an embroidered scarf that barely contains a coiled braid, thick, graying, and tucked just so behind his ear. Every stitch of thread in that braid, a story, every twist a reminder. And yet, for all the rules, there's playfulness too. One girl wears her braid like a crown, adorned with tiny bronze charm. A young man has dyed his with crushed berries, a vivid streak of purple that earns raised brows from the elders, but smiles from his peers. Even the old ways evolve. One woman brushes past you. Her braid is bound in green ribbon, the tips dipped in beeswax. She nods at a man across the room and, just barely, you see him mirror her ribbon color. A private message. A shared secret. No need for words. You settle in near the fire as the feasting begins, hair shimmering all around you like seaweed in firelight. The stories told tonight will fade, but the braids, they'll be undone gently, retied tomorrow, woven again with purpose. And they'll speak volumes without a single word. You're standing on the deck of a longship now, and it's rocking. Not gently, not pleasantly. This is the kind of rolling that turns your bones into soup and your stomach into an unreliable narrator. The sky is gray, the sea is louder than your thoughts, and your hair? Oh, your hair is having an existential crisis. Next to you, a warrior clutches a comb like a talisman, truly trying to part his fringe in a straight line while wind slaps it into sea foam. His fingers are steady, his face determined, and you can't help but admire the commitment because even here, in the middle of the North Sea, haircare continues. One might assume that grooming stopped once Vikings set sail. One would be wrong. Longships didn't come with private bathrooms, but they did come with a set of deeply shared expectations. Keep your weapons sharp, your feet dry, and your head presentable. Many longships carried rainwater barrels, not just for drinking, but for rinsing. Not full-on bathing, don't be greedy, but enough to wet a comb, slick down a beard, maybe rub out a knot. Fringe evidence from ship burial sites like the Oseberg ship includes travel-sized combs, small cloths, and oil pouches. These weren't just stashed, they were carefully packed alongside tools and weapons. Priorities. One surviving text even describes a crew leader who inspected his men before disembarkation, checking armor, boots, and hair. "Let no raider look like a dog," he allegedly said. Harsh, but also very Scandinavian. You watch a man near the mast retrieve a pouch of goose fat. He rubs it between his palms until it softens, then runs it over his scalp to keep it from splitting in the wind. It smells awful, like burnt poultry in desperation, but it works. His braids stay in place. His beard doesn't frizz into storm hay. You nod with approval, which he misinterprets as an invitation to discuss pomade recipes. You listen politely as he debates whether deer tallow gives better shine than bear. Someone else is rinsing a cloth in seawater, wringing it out and patting their face like it's a spa day. The salt stings, sure, but it tightens the skin, sort of. Maybe. You duck as a wave sprays across the deck. Your hair, now damp and windswept, begins to whip into a matted crown. The man beside you offers a strip of linen. "Tie it down," he advises. "The sea's got fingers." You don't ask what that means. Historians still argue whether grooming rituals at sea were purely functional or partly psychological. When you're far from land, drifting toward danger, maybe combing your hair is the last scrap of normalcy. Maybe it's about control, maybe it's about identity, or maybe it's just because everyone gets crabby when they look like a drowned sheepdog. The longship rocks again and someone mutters about Freyr's mood. He's the god of fair weather and apparently not impressed with today's offerings. A few men mumble apologies to the sea. One silently combs through his wife's braid tied to his belt as a token. Not dramatic, just grounding. You peer into a small bronze mirror held by a warrior who has balanced it precariously on his knee. He's using it to check for lice, not because he expects any, but because this is how he keeps himself ready. "A man mustn't fight with itch," he explains, wise words. One fringe theory suggests that hair rituals aboard ship helped enforce discipline. When you're stuck on a wooden boat with 30 other people for weeks, hygiene isn't just personal, it's political. Greasy bangs become a morale issue. Unwashed beards breed mutiny. Lice start revolutions. Even hairstyles served practical roles. Braids kept hair from tangling in rigging or weapons. Beards were oiled to resist salt. Some men tied their hair in tight knots and covered it with woolen caps to reduce sunburn. Not for fashion, though let's be honest, some of those caps slapped. And there were rules, unspoken ones maybe, but clear. One man cuts his hair mid-voyage and doesn't say why. The next day he gets the quiet seat during dinner. You suspect it broke some tradition. Maybe an omen, maybe just bad timing. Later the ship nears shore. The men gather around the rain barrel. Water is precious, but a quick rinse is allowed. A comb is passed around, no one jokes. This is ceremony. You step back and see it clearly now. The hair is the last piece to fall into place before battle. Clean, combed, tied. You watch a man kneel and rebraid his hair with 3 twists, each one mirroring the other. "So the gods can count them," he says. You believe him. Then comes the ribbon, a piece of red wool tied at the braid's end. It flaps once in the wind, steady and silent. And when they jump from the ship, storming into whatever waits, they don't look wild, they look ready. You're crouched beside a fallen warrior now, and though the battle is long over, the air still carries its echo, blood, smoke, and something oddly sweet like crushed grass or burnt pine. Around you, others move in solemn rhythm. They gather the wounded, bless the dead, and gently, very gently, unravel the braids of those who didn't return. And as the wind lifts a clump of matted hair from the earth, you notice something strange. Ink, a curling black line nearly invisible beneath the scalp, twisting along the hairline and disappearing under the tangled remains of a warrior's locks. A tattoo, you blink. Then another man is turned onto his back, and his hair, stiff with sweat and ash, parts just enough to reveal runes along the temple, tiny, deliberate, elegant scalp tattoos. Historians have long debated their existence. The sagas are vague, the records murky, and the remains, well, skin doesn't preserve easily. But every now and then a discovery surfaces. Faint traces of ink beneath the hairline, pigment embedded into bone, stories etched into skulls and forgotten by time. Some say they were prayers, others names, maybe curses or battle rites. Fringe theories suggest some warriors inked maps onto their scalps, likely poetic exaggeration unless someone was really bad with directions. But tattoos beneath the hair, hidden until death, that part tracks. You can almost hear a Viking voice whisper, "What's sacred should be secret." You lean closer to the body. The ink is faded, yes, but intentional. It might be the symbol for Sol, the sun. Or perhaps it's a knot of protection, twisted just beyond your ability to decipher. Either way, it wasn't meant for you. It was meant for whatever comes next. Back in the settlement, you see a group of young warriors gathered near a fire, one of them sitting cross-legged as a thin needle is pressed against his scalp. No one speaks. The process is painful, slow. But when it's over, the others nod in approval. They don't ask what it says. That would be rude, and possibly unlucky. Some believe scalp tattoos were earned only after a kill. Others say they were given to those who had lost someone, carved into the skin as a form of grief made permanent. So the dead are never far, one old woman mutters as she stirs a pot. Her son's hair hides 3 runes and she combs around them daily. One saga tells of a berserker who shaved his head before battle to display his markings. Runes for rage, endurance, and fire. His enemies laughed until they didn't. Afterward, his skull was said to glow faintly in the torchlight. Historians are skeptical, but it's a good story. You walk past a burial preparation. A woman, her hair already cut to mid-neck in mourning, dips a cloth in oil and gently wipes down her husband's scalp. She pauses at a twist of ink near his ear. A name, maybe, or a promise. She doesn't speak it aloud. She just touches it once, then continues. The tattoos are never bragged about. They're not for feasts or festivals. You wouldn't even know someone had one unless you saw them mid-braid or dead. They're a hidden ritual, the kind that lives between public pride and private conviction. You pass a boy practicing his sword swings with a wooden blade. His older brother walks by, lifts a lock of the boy's hair and mutters, "Not yet." The boy nods solemnly. He knows. Scalp ink isn't for children. It's for the marked, the mourned, the changed. In one far-off corner of the north, rumors persist of an entire tribe who tattoo their scalps at birth. You're skeptical, but the idea lingers. Hair as a curtain, ink as the script behind it. What would yours say? Night falls slowly, and the firelight around you turns every head into a halo. Light dancing off braids and beads, and in rare cases a glint of ink just visible at the edge of a parting. A secret shared not with people but with fate. You realize now that Viking hair wasn't just style, it was story. And sometimes the story was written not on the hair itself, but beneath it. You're seated on the edge of a wooden platform now, ankles dangling, watching two men hurl insults at each other like it's an Olympic event. This isn't a brawl, not yet. It's a flighting, a Viking tradition of poetic verbal combat where words cut deeper than swords. And tonight's insults? All about hair. You oily rat-bearded milk slug. Better a slick beard than your feathered squirrel scalp. The crowd roars. It's less of a fight and more of a roast, but the stakes feel oddly high. Hair, it seems, is a prime target. You listen as the barbs continue. Accusations of patchy mustaches, bangs that look braided by blind chickens, and beard oils made from yesterday's soup. One man delivers a line so cutting, something about another's beard housing winter mice, that the recipient actually winces. Points awarded. Applause all around. Hair insults weren't just petty, they were art. The sagas are full of them. One hero is mocked for having hair like a drowned goat. Another is called fur-headed, a subtle way to suggest both cowardice and bad hygiene. And it wasn't only about appearance, it was about honor. To accuse someone of not tending their hair was to imply laziness, neglect, and low standing. Historians still argue whether these insults were always taken seriously or if some were part of expected public theatrics. There's even debate about whether warriors practiced retorts ahead of time. One saga character is said to have carried a list of pre-written comebacks. If true, that's both hilarious and deeply relatable. You shift as the flighting escalates. One man grabs his comb mid-argument, brandishes it like a dagger, and says, "At least I know which end to use." The crowd explodes. A woman near you shakes her head. "They've been at this since spring," she sighs. "Someone should just braid them together and call it done." There's something universally human about this. The insecurity, the pride, the way appearance can become battlefield and shield all at once. And the Vikings? Oh, they leaned in. Even physical fights sometimes began with hair insults. One tale begins with the feast where someone jokes that another's beard looks like horsetail tangled in seaweed. 20 minutes later, half the drinking hall is in splinters. Classic. One fringe account tells of a duel where the loser's punishment was not death, but public shaving, done slowly with dull shears while the village laughed. Cruel, maybe, but worse than dying. Arguably, yes. You notice now that even children are joining in. A girl taunts her brother with, "Your braid's so crooked the gods walk around it." Not bad. He sticks his tongue out but checks his braid anyway. It's not all mockery, though. Compliments were rare but powerful. To say someone had Odin's beard or hair bright as Sif's field was practically a proposal. Hair was a language. And like all languages, it had sweet nothings and savage burns. You wander away from the platform, passing a group of elders who shake their heads at the chaos. One of them, A woman with silver hair woven into a perfect coil mutters, "No one insults anymore with grace." She proceeds to recite a scathing 4-line verse comparing a man's beard to a raven's failed nest. Poetry in motion. Later, back at the longhouse, the flighting champions sit together laughing over their performance. They pass a comb between them, each fixing the very hair they mocked moments ago. There's a bond now, sealed not by blood but by banter, you understand. The teasing wasn't just competition, it was community. Hair here wasn't just personal, it was public property. Your village saw you through your style. If it looked good, you earned respect. If it didn't, someone would definitely say so, and probably in verse, and maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Viking Haircare wasn't just about looking good, it was about staying part of the story, whether in a braid, an insult, or a rumor whispered over mead. Your hair said who you were, so you reach up, smooth your hair, and imagine what nickname they'd give you. Hopefully not seaweed beard. You're indoors now, tucked beside the hearth of a chieftain's longhouse, watching something both strangely touching and mildly awkward. A guest has arrived, damp from travel, smelling faintly of seaweed and ambition, and the hostess is leaning over him, gently rubbing oil into his hair. You blink. Is this normal? Yes, very. In the Viking world, hospitality didn't end with food and shelter. If you were someone's guest, especially someone of status, you might be offered warmth, wine, and yes, a grooming session. It wasn't just generosity, it was etiquette. Because letting someone sit through dinner with wind-snapped hair and a chapped scalp, that would be rude. The hostess hums softly as she works, smoothing the oil in with practiced fingers. The man sits stiffly, unsure whether to enjoy or fear this level of attention. You imagine he's a trader from Gotland, not used to such thorough welcome ceremonies. But he's learning fast. In this longhouse, looking like you just fell off a longship is unacceptable. You watch a young boy nearby fetch a box filled with combs. Some wide, some fine, each carved from bone or horn. The box is passed around like a tray of treats. The guest selects one shaped like a bear. A nice touch. Conversation resumes as if nothing odd is happening. Hospitality through grooming wasn't exclusive to the elite. In many Viking households, washing and combing a visitor's hair was part of the welcome, especially after travel. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of offering a hot towel and a foot massage, only slightly greasier. One fringe account from the Hebrides describes an innkeeper who offered free meals if guests allowed him to braid their hair in the local style. Touristy? Definitely. But the man claimed it helped settle the foreign spirits. No records indicate whether it worked. Historians still debate how widespread this custom was. Some believe it was regional, others that it was reserved for diplomatic visitors or guests of honor. But the practice shows up in multiple sources, always with the same tone: intimate, ceremonial, slightly weird. Back in the longhouse, the guest's hair is now glistening with a blend of goose fat, juniper oil, and possibly rosemary. He smells like a well-seasoned roast, but his hair? Absolutely flawless. A young woman begins braiding it, tight twists running along the scalp, finished with a dark wool ribbon. She doesn't ask permission, he doesn't object. This is just what's done. You begin to understand. Offering to groom someone isn't invasive. It's nurturing, a physical act of welcome, a signal, you're safe here. We'll care for your body while your soul rests. Even in the sagas, moments like this appear. Before a feast, a host might gift combs to guests. Before battle, warriors might braid each other's hair. Not just for function, but connection. Grooming was one of the few acts that blurred lines between family and stranger, host and guest, friend and foe. You see a man arrive now from the hills, his beard is crusted with frost, his shoulders sag. Without a word, someone places a warm cloth in his hands. Another person gently unhooks his cloak, and then out comes the oil. No one laughs, no one comments, they simply begin. The act of hospitality here is less about comfort, more about restoration, a recalibration of the self. One woman brings a bowl of warm water. She kneels before the guest and wrings a cloth over his head. As she works, she tells a story, something about a dream she had where a fox stole her comb. The guest chuckles. His shoulders relax. Hair care here isn't just practical, it's narrative. It's human. You glance around and realize that almost everyone's hair has been touched by someone else. Even the elder men, so proud, so stoic, carry braids clearly woven by softer hands. You spot two children rebraiding their mother's hair as she naps. A boy oils his sister's bangs while she practices runes in the dirt. This isn't vanity, it's community. And maybe that's the real secret. That for all their ferocity, their raids, their legends soaked in blood and gold, what made the Norse world durable was the quiet ritual of care. The hand in the hair, the comb passed across firelight, the unspoken kindness of grooming someone before a meal. You shift, slightly humbled, and wonder who in your life might braid your hair if you asked. You're in the middle of a bustling trade hub now, probably Hedeby or maybe even Burka, and the air is a stew of salted fish, foreign spices, and the unmistakable scent of sweaty ambition. Cloaks swirl, coins jingle, accents clash like swords. This isn't just commerce, it's cultural collision. And hair is right in the thick of it. You walk past a Slavic merchant selling waxed linen hair wraps, dyed the color of beetroot. Next to him, a Baltic woman offers tiny glass beads for braids, each the size of a pea and patterned like sea urchins. Nearby, a man from the Frankish coast is pitching scented beard oils. Rosemary, lavender, even something that claims to smell like honey after rain. Dubious, but popular. Here, Viking styles don't dominate. They mingle. You see Norse traders with traditionally tight crown braids, but now ornamented with silk ribbons from Constantinople. One woman wears a braid coiled like a snail shell at her temple, copied from a style she saw on a foreign bride 2 summers ago. Fashion here isn't just adapted, it's remixed. You pause at a stall where a young man demonstrates braiding techniques. His own hair is done in a half-up, half-down knot, common in Western Slavic regions. He moves quickly, efficiently, showing off a 4-strand style not seen back in his village. A group gathers, one woman nods. We'll try that for the harvest festival. Knowledge exchanged, transaction complete. Historians still debate whether these hair care fusions were deliberate or just inevitable. Trade brings more than goods. It brings people, preferences, styles. Did Vikings see foreign hairstyles and adopt them eagerly? Or did they roll their eyes, then wake up 3 weeks later trying it themselves? Possibly both. One fringe account describes a Viking chieftain who returned from a raid in the east with his hair arranged in dozens of micro braids on some woven with thread and copper wire. His own people were scandalized. He kept it anyway. Trendsetter. You walk through the market square and watch a Norse girl examine a small vial of thick oil. The merchant claims it's from Arabia, made with date resin and something called myrrh. She uncorks it, sniffs cautiously, and smiles. "My beard will love this," she jokes, and everyone laughs. One woman, older, sharp-eyed, pulls you aside and points to a braid pattern worn by a nearby sailor. "That one means he's part Saxon," she says. "They twist the middle strand around the others. Looks better, but harder to keep clean." You ask how she knows. She winks. "I married one." The longhouse back home may have its grooming customs, but here style is currency. To look outdated is to look uninformed. You notice a man adjusting his hair in a polished copper tray. Not because it's messy, but because it's not current. Children run past with their hair wrapped in strips of colored cloth. A new trend from the South where head wraps are common. The colors don't match. The cloth is too long. They don't care. They're trying something new. And the adults? Many will copy it by winter. In the distance, you spot a man shaving the sides of his head with a curved blade. He leaves the top long, tied back with dyed string. You've seen this before on horsemen from the steppes. He meets your gaze. "Keeps me cool under my helmet," he says. Then after a beat, and the girls seem to like it. One archaeologist once called these trade towns the ancient world's Instagram. That feels right. Trends spread fast, styles mutate. One man imports wax, another adds local herbs, a woman copies a foreign braid and sells it as a wedding special. Within weeks, it's traditional, and no one seems to mind. Because this isn't about purity, it's about pride. If something looks good and holds in wind, it stays. If it makes you feel like a better version of yourself, it's sacred. You pass a stall with a tiny hand mirror framed in bronze. The vendor gestures. "Imported from Frisia. Makes ugly hair look noble." You laugh, but part of you wonders if it's true. He adds, "Buy 2 and I'll throw in a braid comb." You don't buy anything, but you leave changed. Back in your camp that night, you see someone trying the new 4-strand braid. Failing slightly, but trying. Someone else oils their beard with the honey after rain blend, and someone else quietly wraps a red linen strip around their ponytail. No explanation needed. Viking style wasn't static. It was global. It listened. It watched. And it borrowed without shame. Haircare wasn't just about where you came from. It was about where you were willing to go. You're in a quiet room now, where everything feels slower, like the air itself has paused to think. A woman kneels beside a man lying on a bed of wool and pine boughs. His breaths are shallow, his eyes mostly closed. There's no panic here, no rush. Only calm, because they all know what's coming. He's dying, but before he goes, there's one last thing to do. She leans forward, reaches into a small woven bag, and pulls out a comb. The wood is worn smooth from years of use, the teeth darkened with age. Gently, more gently than you thought possible, she lifts the man's hair and begins to comb. You barely breathe. This is the Sidasta Gradeslan, the last grooming. A practice whispered in the sagas, hinted at in folk traditions but never written down. It's too personal, too sacred. You don't comb the dead in a rush, you prepare them. For the gods, for the ancestors, for the halls beyond. The woman works slowly. She untangles, smooths, oils, her hands never shake. This isn't mourning. This is devotion. Historians still debate whether this ritual had fixed rules or was shaped by family custom. Some accounts say the hair must be braided anew. Others insist it be left flowing, so the winds of Valhalla can find it. One tale tells of warriors refusing burial until their beards were oiled. No man meets Odin with a dry chin, someone mutters. The children wait in silence. A few clutch ribbons or carved beads, unsure if they're allowed to cry yet. One places a comb of his own beside the bed. So he won't forget, the boy whispers. You see the woman pause now. She lifts a small piece of red wool, the same ribbon she tied in his hair the day he left for battle decades ago. She weaves it into his braid again, full circle. It's hard not to cry. Another woman brings a bowl of warm water. They dip a cloth, gently wipe the man's face. Then they start on his beard, oiling it with something sweet, probably birch tar mixed with honey. He smells like forest and fire, like home. You wonder quietly if this is what every Viking hopes for, not just a warrior's death, but a tidy one. One with clean hands, a combed braid, and someone to hold your head while the world fades. And this part, it's not for the gods, it's for the living. The family gathers closer. They murmur memories, rub oil into their own hands, pass the comb like a relic. There's no hurry. Death has arrived, but it can wait. You remember all the rituals now. The braids before battle, the oiling on the longship, the flighting insults, the temple offerings, the stolen soap trials. And you realize they were all preparing for this, for the last trim. The final touch. Because in the end, you take nothing with you but what you wore in honor. Hair groomed by love is one last act of dignity, the old man exhales. Just once. The room doesn't react, it simply settles. Later they will cut one braid, bury it with him. Bury the rest too, wrapped in his best cloak. Comb placed over his heart. They'll say it helps guide him to the halls of his ancestors. Or maybe they'll just say he looked good going in. You step outside now. The world is quiet. You see someone combing a horse, another braiding a child's hair. Life goes on. But in every gesture there's that same thread. Care. And maybe that's what Viking Haircare really was. Not vanity, not battle prep, not fashion, but memory, a language of fingers and combs telling the world who you were and who you loved. The fire is low now, barely flickering. The combs are put away, the oil bowls washed and stacked. You sit in the hush of the longhouse where even the creak of wood seems to exhale. You think of all the heads you've seen, the braids, the beads, the soot-slick fringes and oiled mustaches. Each one a quiet proclamation, each one a ritual. You remember the sound of comb teeth dragging through hair, the hiss of oil warmed by hands, the slow, deliberate rhythm of braiding, not just for beauty but for balance. And you remember the people, the warriors, the children, the merchants and mothers, each one adding a thread to a story told not with words but with care. Hair was never just hair, it was tradition, protection, a thread between now and what came before, and in those soft daily acts, those gentle unspoken moments, you saw something extraordinary: stillness. In a world that rarely stopped moving. Now the longhouse sleeps, the braids rest, the ribbons fade into dreams, even the gods are quiet, so let your shoulders sink a little deeper. Let the wind pass unnoticed through the trees, and let your mind drift slowly, softly, like a comb through wool. You are clean, you are safe, you are exactly where you're meant to be.